Today I'm going to show you how to turn one of the crochet patterns that you have into something completely different. Do you like the idea of crochet designing, but you're not quite there? I'm going to show you how I recently turned my crocodile pattern into a dragon. It was easier than you'd think. Disclaimer, don't take someone else's pattern, use it to make something new, and then publish that pattern, or in any way claim that pattern as your own. It's not your pattern, it's someone else's pattern that you've adapted, and that is super cool to make as a thing for you, but it's not copyright you. Understood? On the same page? Okay. Then I'm going to tell you how to do it. So first, I'm going to give you half a dozen ways to turn a crochet pattern that you have into something that is similar but unique to you. And then I'm going to show you how to take a crochet pattern and make it into something completely different. Changing colors is a really, really great way to make something look really quite different. And the ways that I would suggest that you do it is by changing the palette rather than just changing the main bulk color. So for example, take my little gecko here. If I made it in pastels, it would look remarkably different. It would still look different and cool if I just changed the green out for like an electric blue. Changing the green to a bright blue would be awesome and make it look unique, but to really give a totally different feel to it with colors, change the color palette. So if it's bright colors, go with pastels or like autumnal tones, that kind of thing. So change the whole palette to get a really different look. Don't underestimate how much difference yarn weight makes. So if I've given you a pattern for an Aran weight yarn that asks for a 4mm crochet hook, and you want a chunky weight yarn, read the packet, see what size hook it says, and then bring it down a tiny bit. So if your chunky yarn says 5.5mm crochet hook, use a 5mm crochet hook to make that toy. Sometimes you have to drop down even more. I'm working with a yarn at the moment where the packet says 5mm, I'm using 3.5. It's this pony. As you can see, not too small a hook. Right hook size, massively different to what it says on the packet. That's just as a general rule for amigurumi, but it can also be true for things like blankets if you want a bit of a tighter stitch. Anyway, I digress. It can make an astounding difference to how something looks when you change the size of the eyes. Safety eyes come from really, really small to really big sizes. You can also get a very different look from the toy for getting like from a plain black safety eye to one that's got a coloured iris. Iris? Is that the iris? That's the iris. I should know this. I'm quite old. But yeah, so changing from just a plain black safety eye to one with a coloured or even sparkly iris can really make a big difference. These features massively change how a toy looks. And when you do that, you could also consider using a totally different eye. So for example, some button eyes instead of safety eyes, or even sewing them on by hand or using a little magic circle and attaching that to make a really different look. Honestly, massively changes the whole feel of the animal. You can also add expressions and features in terms of adding tiny little rows to the crochet or sewing lines. So for example, you can make eyes look elongated by sewing lines around the edge of them to extend them out, or by giving them eyelashes, or for example, hand sewing a mouth when there isn't currently one on the toy. It all makes such a huge difference to how the thing appears with quite a minimal, let's face it, effort. And finally, for this sort of pared down section, swapping out patches for internal colour changes or even surface crocheting on a design can really impact how the toy looks. I love surface crocheting for features because hand sewing is great too, but surface crochet brings out this texture to it that really sort of, I feel like, adds something, and in a way that having a patch stuck on the top doesn't, because it's integrated with the toy itself. And now, let's look at how to completely swap the animal over, because this is something that is perhaps simpler than you might imagine, and we're going to chat about my crocodile as an example here. So when my friend Jen looked at my crocodile and said it would also look cool as a dragon, she was simply imagining this crocodile with dragon wings. And that's an awesome thing to imagine, right? I mean, who could complain about a crocodile with dragon wings? But to my mind, a dragon is either like an upright plushy style dragon, or it's the mythical creature from Anne McCaffrey's Pern books. Throwback, old school reference to those of you who've read them. But that's the kind of dragon that I was imagining when she said this. And the way that I did it was in a few different stages. First, I looked at the basic components and I thought to myself, well, is this going to actually work for the animal that I want? And that's what I think that you should do first. Look at the plushie that's in front of you and say, okay, do the basic structure of this fit the animal that I like? So for example, if someone wanted to turn this into an elephant, I mean, yeah, you could do it, but basically it bears no resemblance at all. And by the time you've changed it, it's not the same thing. But the basic structure of this crocodile can match some of the basic ideas of what a dragon might look like. But you would need to stretch and adapt the form. So what I wanted to do was give it a little bit of a longer neck, a longer tail, maybe a little bit of a thicker body, and a slightly more tapered snout. And to extend existing sections, all you need to do is add in another round of single crochets, or make a delay or move further forwards an increase or a decrease part. And for this, literally what I did was I got my notepad and I went through the pattern for how I made this. And when I wanted to add in extra rows as I was going, I simply wrote down, like, between row 10 and 11, add 2 rows of single crochets. I wrote it down as I went because I knew that if it looked nice, I wanted to publish the pattern afterwards. And I can do that because I made this pattern and then I turned it into another pattern. If you didn't make the first pattern, see the previous disclaimer. So I extended out in my brain those different parts, and I did the same thing with the legs, because crocodiles, okay, in reality, proportionately, their legs aren't quite that short, but because they walk in this way, it can look like a little bit they are. Whereas the dragon, I wanted it to be sort of creeping, crawling forwards in motion. So I gave it much longer limbs with which to do that. Now you can see that I also changed up some other things. And again, I took some of these from different patterns. So the first thing that I took from a different pattern were these horns. These horns were originally the design that I used for a goat. Here you go, there's your little goat's horns. They're there. And the feet are inspired by the feet that I made for my day gecko. So those parts amalgamated into this, and in the end I did the feet slightly different, but the shape was very much inspired by the day gecko shape. And then I added the wings. And the way that I added the wings to make them look more a part of the shape is that I used the surface crochet to tie it together. So I maintained these ridges down the back of the toy that I'd had for the crocodile, but I amalgamated them into the wing design going all the way around the edges here, and then I hand sewed the veins onto the wings to make them really stand out as a separate structure. Oh, and I decided to give him this forked tongue. Lots of reptiles, as you know, have forked tongues. Dragons are reptiles? I think dragons are reptiles. But I also wanted it to, at a glance, give the illusion of breathing fire, and I'm quite happy with how that came out. So obviously adding relevant features, changing the shape to exaggerate it, to manipulate it to the shape that you want are integral parts of it. But honestly, one of the best ways that you can make a new animal from an existing animal toy is through the features. And I'll bring you back to the horse again as an example for this. Now, at a very basic level, pretend my horse has arms and legs. At a very basic level, obviously we all know that you can turn a horse into a Pegasus with wings, or into a unicorn with a horn, or into an alicorn with both, if for My Little Pony friends out there. And that's really, really fun thing to do and relatively low effort to make a different animal. However, to make it really completely different animal, take a look at this horse, and I'm going to show you some images of my wallaby. Now, I didn't make this horse from the wallaby, but the fact is that the basic shapes of a lot of animals are really similar. And when you begin designing crochet toys and you're thinking in shapes, you're coming across common shapes, and you can look at a toy that exists and say, okay, so if I did different ears on this and put a pouch on the front, is that now a kangaroo? Changing ears phenomenally changes the look of a toy. What I encourage you to do if you're thinking about getting into designing is to make some really basic head and body shapes. So just make some shapes that look like Skittles, essentially. And from those shapes, try different ears on them. And I often make ears from magic circles as well, coming down, slowly tapering, and then I flatten the magic circle rather than stuff it once it's created. Try different ears. I think that you'll be really pleased to see how easy it is to create something that is really unique using really similar composite parts. I hope that's been really helpful or inspired you to have a go with designing. It is one of the most fun things that I do. I'm massively passionate about it, and I so encourage you to try the same thing. If you want to get the patterns for anything I've shown you today or anything else I've ever made, all my patterns are free all the time on the Lucy Kate Crochet website. Just go on there, they'll be up there for you. I'll leave a link down below. And if you have any questions and want help and support in getting into this super fun and awesome hobby, just give me a shout in the comments and I'll do my very best to help you out. And I'll see you there. Happy crocheting.